Okay, thank you, Avi, and good evening and very warm welcome to everybody. So we're going to start this seminar on webinar on speciality of informal work in Indian cities with special reference to Delhi. The purpose of this is to share our journey in trying to understand the speciality of informal workers, and particularly in the context of Delhi. And we have a very nice and a very good panel over here. Joining me today is Dr. Gautam Bhan, who's from Indian Institute of Human Settlement. Many of us know him, work closely with him, really admire the work that he does. So thank you, Gautam, for joining. Also with us is Bijal Bhatt. Bijal is from Mahila Housing Seva Trust. Again, somebody whose work we admire very much, learn from every day. Thank you, Bijal Ben, for joining us today. With us also is Savita Ben. Savita Ben is a resident of Savda Ghevra. Savita Ben Savda Ghevra से आई हैं और मैं उनका खास स्वागत करती हूँ हमारे साथ जुड़ने के लिए. आपका बहुत बहुत स्वागत सविता Ben. Also is Swati Janu from Social Design Collaborative and her team who's joining us. So without much ado, I'm going to jump right in and give you a very brief introduction of our work here. As you know that we run a project called Focal City Delhi project in Delhi, which is WeGo from WeGo, part of the larger project called Focal Cities project. And one of the objectives of the key objective of the Focal City project is to promote workers' voices and networks at the city level. And this is what we started to do when we started our work 4 years back in Delhi. The striking thing about it in Delhi particularly is that, there is some amount of visibility of informal workers at the city level, the street vendors being the case in point, but really not many of the sectors of the informal economy remain completely invisible. And there's not much evidence of even their existence. So that was one of the things that we started looking at. Home-based workers who work from home was one of the sectors that we started looking at initially, and we found that they absolutely had no visibility. 80% that we have statistics from PLFS and NSS earlier before that. And at the city level, we see that a large number of workers are informal. But in terms of when we try to look at different sectors, the data perhaps does not reflect what we see on the ground. So for instance, home-based workers, where every community that we go to, most communities have home-based workers, yet we don't have enough, or the data that we have does not reflect that. I think some of the problem is also about capturing women's work in urban settings. So that to counter some of those challenges that we were finding in our work, to build an evidence of the existence of informal economy in all its diversity at the city level, that we started this initiative of trying to find innovative ways of building evidence in the absence of any kind of data to support us for our advocacy at the city level. So that was one of the things that was pushing us. We also wanted to establish that informal economy and informal workers were the norm rather than exception. And I think we were advocating for the city plans and city development and urban development practitioners to embrace the informal economy rather than look at them as small groups, workers, sectors, etc. The other thing that we that all of us know is that informal workers work in informal spaces. So the spatial aspect of work is something we were trying to explore more and more. And more so because, some of our work that we are involved in needed for us to make recommendations about formal space allocations, about having formalizing in terms of actually assigning spaces, but also because we had a couple of laws and policies which were quite empowering to some sections of the informal workers, like the Street Vendor Act and the solid waste management rules of 2016. And we thought that if there was a coherence with the spatial allocation of space for some of these places, there was a lot of possibility of leveraging on these already existing legislation. So promoting livelihood spaces and quality of those spaces then was something that was also promoting us to explore why we wanted to explore innovative and new ways of talking about informality at a city level. The third thing was the connect between housing and livelihood. So homes as places of work is something that is very evident and we all know about it, but it varies across sectors. It is not just home-based workers who use their homes as their place of work, and therefore quality and location of homes have a bearing on their income and productivity, but also other workers. For instance, the waste pickers are collecting and sorting waste at their homes, and therefore they are also keeping a lot of their waste at homes. Sometimes they have to pay extra for extra space for sorting, or sometimes they are segregated within a slum and they almost live in a situation which is a slum within slum kind of a situation because of the way they are collecting waste, because their whole that waste is, it's scale that you have certain amount of waste, then you get a good price for it. So home as a asset, productive asset, was an important issue that we were encountering in our work, and we wanted to understand more about it, and in terms of quality, in terms of location, in terms of connection with where the work was coming from, where the worker was going to. So that was the third sort of push that we felt. And of course, the whole issue of tenure, of the burden of rent, highlighted by COVID, were some of the things that we were looking at. Finally, one of the things that is our mandate is building voice. And how can we equip the worker groups and networks that we are promoting with this information, which is universal, easy to access, which becomes a tool for self-empowering as well as for advocacy at the city level. And it is a combination of these factors that led us to explore spatiality in terms of mapping, in terms of visual depiction of what we were seeing on the ground. And we were very, very lucky to have Swati and her team who sort of agreed to collaborate, and every concept, every issue that we raised to them, they took it a step further and they developed it and presented it. So I think with these 3-4 motives or sort of reasons why we started going down that road, I want to finish now. But I do want to say that what we are going to launch today are 3 sets of products. They are work in progress. We will show you hard copies of them, but they are essentially digital products, and we will continue to develop and work on them. So also we especially welcome people to give us insights or ideas or any sort of suggestions for improving them. So I'm going to stop here, and Gautam, I'm going to invite you to give a note on speciality of informal work in Indian cities.
Thank you. Thanks, Shalini. Thanks, everyone else. It's great to see so many folks and friends and comrades here. I'm going to be very brief, actually, because I think it's important for us to spend much more time with the products themselves. And so I'll take 10 minutes. And what I want to lay out only is the importance of thinking spatially about the question of informal work in the urban and what it means. What is to give you a little bit of a language to think through and appreciate what these products are trying to do. Let's take a hypothetical situation. We federate, we organize, we struggle, we fight, and that terrifying day comes where we actually get an invitation to the table, and the municipal government turns around and says, I can see Marty smiling on the video because there's nothing worse than succeeding in struggle. And the government says, you know what, you're right. The new master plan is coming up. Let's put informality into this master plan. what do you want us to put? What should the master plan say, right? And all our critique and our analysis and our demands have to suddenly turn into propositions in a deeply constrained practice like master planning, whose dominant logic is the physical allocation of people, resources, and activities in the city in space. And that word in space becomes so critical. I'm taking physical planning because it's the most extreme example of a place where the where of informal work is actually more important than the what and the how. We know the debates on registration. We know the debates on regulation. We know how to think about enterprises and workers. We know about wages. We know about working conditions. But we have not yet thought through how to turn the spatiality of our work into a practice that can then translate into things like master planning. Right? So our target for informal work has not been the planning department. It has to be the planning department. And so the question then to think about in this hypothetical situation is, what would we say? What claims would we make about the spatiality of work? And what is the language we should be using in which to understand how informal work is spatial? So I'm just going to leave you with a set of words. I have one slide. Okay. The first thing is to think about that this spatial has two important parts. One is that some informal work happens in public space, and this is pivotal. Right? And it's the one thing that COVID would have taught us over the last 2 years, is that when we told people to work at home and lock down the public spaces of our city, we were effectively creating a set of people who were blocked out, not from offices, but from the city itself. Right? And so when work restarted, the question of work in the landfill, in the street, in the market, in the construction site, all work in public space, right? All work that in the master plan, to continue our example, is considered social and public infrastructure, but not economic infrastructure. Work that is distinguished from what is called commercial or industrial or economic. And this distinction is pivotal, because if public space is understood as social, if it's understood as infrastructural, but not understood as economic, we can never make an argument that public toilets for women are an economic infrastructure and not just a social infrastructure, for example. Right? So if I think about reconfiguring our language to say, what does it mean for a landfill to be an employment site and not just a waste infrastructure collection point? What does it mean not to be studied only by engineers, but equally by economists? What does it mean for us to think about any improvement in waste collection, say a waste to energy plant, say a new kind of technology for biocomposting, to ask what the employment impact of that technology will be, not just what its pollution impact or its technical efficiency impact will be. The second part about thinking about the spatiality of informal work is that it is also private, which is that it happens very often within one's own homes, and Shalini's already talked about home-based workers, but also in other people's homes, which is the question of domestic work. Now, this is a very different spatiality. And for informal work that occurs in homes, there is a different logic to what it means to have adequate infrastructure for work in a workplace. Because then the question of what adequate sanitation is for my residents is inseparable from the question of what my adequate sanitation is for my work home, let's use that word, which is equally a site for employment as it is for residents, right? Where domestic and productive activities compete spatially. And if I ask this question, if I anticipate that every home could be a work home because of the dominance of home-based work in, say, the South Asian city, then when I, as a master planner, says, what is the minimum size of an affordable housing unit, which currently in Indian planning becomes 30 square meters, based on building norms about how much space individuals need to live domestically, not productively, right? Would that then actually become 50 square meters? Because the assumption would be that every working affordable house is also a work home and not just a home. Right? What would it mean to redesign Savitaben's house in Savdagevra, where minimum plot sizes for resettlement were 18 square meters, right? Not even the 25 square meters? How would we change norms? How would we change development control rules? All this language that I'm invoking from planning only to suggest that when we start invoking this spatiality and materiality of informal work, we change the notion of planning practice. We change the governance of space. We change development norms. We change building sizes. We change zoning. We change questions of what it means to think of a mixed use zone, right? And actually say all zones are mixed use if works are also work homes, right? So the thing about the opening ambit I want to give you is to think about this notion of the public and the private. And what I really like about some of the products, you're going to see this in a few minutes, is that you will hear stories across this public-private spatiality. And their regulation is different. The entry point is different, right? And what one enters into when one thinks about the public and the private has to be different. But the thing about it is that beyond these simpler categories of public and private, there are also complex geographies that informal work has. And they move across scale. What do I mean by this? Sometimes work clusters. Think of this word, clusters, right? So urban economists will tell you there is a reason why all the gold merchants are on one street and all the paper merchants are on a next street and the IT wants its own zone, right? Think about it as agglomeration, as a clustering that is beneficial for multiple types of economic activities to you. Informal work also clusters. Home-based workers settle in particular neighborhoods within a proximity to industrial areas because it makes the movement to supply chains of which they're part more logical, more feasible. But this clustering is not evident in our patterns. So you have an industrial area, and within 500 meters of the industrial area, you will see a clustering of home-based work. Right? And this is a kind of clustering that is a spatial pattern we must begin to understand. It is an agglomeration, right? But the economists aren't looking for it. Workers know it. Instinctively, you know it. How do you cluster around particular forms of resettlement, right? Why is there more home-based work in the urban village versus the resettlement colony versus the unauthorized occupation versus a consolidated old city area? Why do different historical urban neighborhoods create different conditions, for example, for home-based work or waste work? There is a clustering logic to informal work that we haven't completely yet understood because we don't know how to trace it, but it's definitely its spatial patterns. But not just clusters. Sometimes informal work follows as a geography. It follows the movement of waste through the city, where it's collected, where it's aggregated, where it's sorted, where it's moved, where it's dumped, where it's recycled. So e-waste flows a particular way through the city. Wet waste flows a particular way through the city. There are geographies that are flows. They're not easy to pin down, and they move dynamically. They can create and move away ephemerally, just like the weekly market that can pop up on Tuesday, desettle, and pop up somewhere else on Thursday. They move. And workers follow these geographies. So not all geographies are static, right? So when we think about the question of home-based work and informal work in geography, we're also unsettling paradigms of saying, I can make a neat map and tell you where all informal work in the city is. We can't. Because informality is precisely that flexibility and that dynamicness and that movement, right? Recycling one day here, collecting one day here, moving where you need to go. But it also has stabilities and patterns. There are landfills that have been there for 20 years. There are natural markets and repair cycles that have been there for 15 years. So there is a mix of moving and settling. There is a mix of a mobile geography of both markets that move and workers that move, right? So when you think of fairy women as a worker category in many Indian cities who barter utensils for old clothes, they set off at 4 in the morning and they walk dozens of kilometers a day. Their geography is movement. It isn't the market or the site or the shop or the home. How do we think about the spatiality of workers who constantly move, but also of the fact that where one used to recycle and meet is not always where one now recycles and meets. Those geographies also move. So how do we think of a flexibility of the spatiality of informal work that allows and understands this movement? Sometimes informal work surrounds. You build a new wholesale vegetable market, you will create a new ring of informal work around it, informal transport workers. So in formal planning, we think of transit-oriented development. You build a new transport line and housing follows it. Well, informal geographies, informal work absolutely respond to new infrastructure the same way. Delhi created a new geography of informal paratransit when new metro stations came up. Every time a new line came up, a new local circulation of the rickshaw and the share auto and the shared jeepney came up. changing regulation. In the metro station next to my house, you had a station that went to a nearby court, hospital, mall in that order. And suddenly the auto rickshaws had 2 benches in the front. And suddenly there were 5 people shared autos. That was not in the regulation. But then the regulation changed to allow 5 people shared autos. And therefore the practice created the norm that was created by the spatiality of this necessary zipping of this new loop created by new infrastructure. This is also transit-oriented development. But this is an impact we don't trace. And I think this is the distinction between those formal and informal logics. The geographies of one kind are moving. The last one I'll say, and then I'll stop, is the question that these are also geographies that are not just geographies of work, but these are geographies of settling and being in the city. Not just ways of building homes like you'll see in Gebra, but finding work, finding that first rickshaw that you rented when you first walked in, then joining as a shop apprentice, and then finding your own cart, and then turning into a vendor. So this inhabitation means that the geography of informality is also a geography of time, and never just a geography of space. And that we have to anticipate that incrementally creating these spaces, sustaining them, moving them, is absolutely the question of the spatiality of geography. So in the left and the right of my side, you kind of see the proposition to the left that is categories, clear, maps, data, information. And the right is a caution that informality has always also been that is just outside our reach. That we must also lend to its credit for its flexibility and its complexity. We must not try to map it to flatten it. We must try to map it to actually capture its layers and its depth, its resilience and its vulnerability. And I think the products that you're about to see do precisely that. Their aim is not to map to control. Their aim is to map, to represent, to listen, to understand, and to narrate, in a sense, that maps of informal work are also stories of informal workers' lives. And there is no distinction between these two forms. And I'm excited for you to see them. So I'm going to stop right here and hand back over to Shalini so we can proceed towards those maps with this language in your mind, with both the uncertainty and opening in your mind, and reminding you that, of course, the hypothetical that I placed in the beginning is not a hypothetical at all, because half the Zoom call for the last 2 years has been working with the Delhi government to try and get informal work into Delhi's new draft master plan, precisely challenging ourselves to say, what should we put in here in this essential but flawed document? And how do we really put our nose to the paper and say, this is what we mean. We want this zone for home-based work, this kind of recognition for landfills, this kind of street design, and all those claims turn into articulation. So this is very much a pressing political matter of our time. And products like these that come from the world of informal work could not have come at a more opportune and important political time. So I'm grateful for them as a reader. I'm grateful for them as someone who receives them, and I can't wait for you to see them. And that's all from me.
Thank you, Gautam. Thank you very much. Really an inspiring vision of mapping and visualizing informal work. So I'm going to go straight to Bijal Ben to launch our products. I know it's rather difficult to sort of launch in a webinar, but we'll try. So Bijal Ben, just show us and launch it for us, please.
Thank you, Shalini Ben. Am I visible?
Yes.
I'm very, very excited to launch this, and thank you for inviting me. Is it visible?
Yes.
I'm just opening this up. This first one is for the home-based workers. What kind of informal settlements they are located in. And if you just, should I make it like this? Yeah. If you just turn it back. Okay, here it is. Can you see it all?
Yeah.
If you just turn it at the back, they are showing how the lack of infrastructure or the kind of settlements that stay in affects their economic productivity. The first one. Here is the second product, which talks about the waste warriors in the city, their locations. I'm just going to open it up. Yeah, where they are in the waste chain management and their demands. Yeah. And the third one here, which is about an informal settlement, Sauda Ghevra, which is now a resettlement, and where they had been relocated during the Commonwealth Games in 2005, and how over the years they have integrated themselves slowly, a timeline of how they have integrated themselves, where they were given only plots, and slowly they have built over, installed water connections, toilets, street lights, social infrastructure, and are still trying to integrate themselves into the city. A pictorial depiction. I won't go into details because Shalini Man is going to walk you through them, but I really do feel that these are going to be very, very useful, both at the community level and at the workers level, because I think this is going to help them understand how they are also going to contribute in the city, and how their work is helping the cities, and how they have a right to the cities. I think when we go to these communities, it's going to become extremely important. And I think it's also going to be important for the policy influence, not only, I must say, at the city level, but at all three levels, at the city, the state, and the national level. Because, just in 5 minutes, when you go to the MPs and the MLAs, and when they don't have the time, at a glance to see of the informal sector, where they are located and what are their demands. So I'm extremely excited, and I must congratulate the Focal Cities Delhi team on launching, such beautiful products, which not only show the economic contribution of the informal workers, but also link them with speciality. As Gautam said, at an opportune time, at the right time, when the master plan of Delhi is being formulated, and this is really going to help us make those representations. Congratulations once again to the Focal Cities Delhi team and Shalini Ben.
Thank you, Bijalwen. Thank you very much for doing this for us. And if we could share a screen, if my colleagues would put these up on the screen, I will quickly take you all through them. So the first one that we will look at is on home-based workers. And as I said, that we found in our grassroots level, our partners reported that there was a lot of home-based work in Delhi, but we didn't have enough statistics, or the statistics didn't tell us the extent of home-based work. So we wanted to show how it was, where it was located, because home is a place of work. So we started this mapping process and gradually came up till here. One of the first things we did with our partners, trying to just find evidence of home-based work. Of course, I want to say that all these maps are they are not the complete exhaustive listing of home-based workers. This is just information we have. In this map, we have shared three kinds of, this map is built on three kinds of information. One for which we are very grateful, Seva, one of our partners, has shared their membership data telling us where the home-based workers are located. We've also done a review of literature, and if there has been a study which located in a particular location, that is also mapped here. And then for the past 3-4 years, we have also been commissioning studies, and very grateful to Seva, ISSD, and MHT for helping us do those studies to build evidence on home-based workers. So one of the first, so these dots that you see in Delhi are the dots where there are clusters of home-based work. There are different kinds of work that is being done in many of these clusters. And you will see on the right-hand side at the box below, you will see the different kinds of work. And this is not exhaustive, but some of the key work that it is doing. And most people believe that, home-based work is either craft or embroidery, but you will see there's a host of tasks that the women are doing, from toy packaging to artificial flower making to, of course, embroidery and embellishment. Then the second thing that we tried to do was that we tried to group these locations by the kind of settlement type. And we took four categories, which is unauthorized colonies, urban villages, resettlement colonies, and JJ clusters. And we tried to see where they were. The purpose was that because home is their workplace, then the quality of home and the quality of infrastructure determines their productivity. We've already talked about it. So the whole idea was to see, and we saw that all of these four were located in these four, all these settlements were located in these four. They are marked by degrees of insecurity of tenure, but they are marked by poor quality of housing and poor infrastructure. So the home-based workers of Delhi continue to work in small houses, in locations where there is very poor infrastructure, etc. Now you see those big blue these blue things. These are we try to also then try to locate important key points for the home-based workers. So we saw that many, and Gautam mentioned it just before that many home-based workers were outsourcing work from factories and industrial areas. Now, in a lot of research has been focused on Delhi being the hub of work from embroidery and embellishment as part of, global supply chains. But there is also in the information that we have collected over these years, we also see a lot of work being outsourced locally, and home-based workers are doing that. So the connect with that industrial area is very important. And it is also important to highlight it, because if we think of a city plan or an industrial plan which does not understand this connection of an ecosystem of which sources out work from these industrial areas and talks about either relocating these industrial areas or for whatever reasons, or not promoting these industrial areas, then it is also not just the workers in these factories, but a whole ecosystem of workers, including home-based workers. And you will see if the Patparganj industrial area, and there's a whole cluster, the Trilokpuri, Kalyanpuri, all those areas are where the home-based workers are connected. The second is the wholesale market. So the wholesale market, which is basically a lot of workers, which is where the worker would, so Sadar Bazaar, for instance. Now, this market is where a lot of workers, self-employed workers, would get their raw material, or the contractors who were giving them work would get their this thing. But in COVID times, if Sadar Bazaar is closed, then there is no work for home-based workers. So I think these connections were also some things that we wanted to highlight. Then you will see that there is a grading of color in the whole of the map. And we've also wanted to show that, the concentration of home-based work in high density built up areas. So these are areas across the river, probably low income groups, worker groups are working, porous borders with Noida. Maybe the male workers are going into factories, or other areas of work into UP, etc., or maybe working over there as other informal workers, and women continue to work as home-based workers. This is what we try to show in this map. Now, on the other side, opposite side, yes, the opposite side of this map then tries to show you a whole figure, a drawing, where we have an unauthorized colony, resettlement colony, a JJ cluster. Now, it's important, we may break them into groups, into compartments and categories of unauthorized colony, resettlement colony based on tenure and ownership. But I think it is also important to understand that they many times they may actually exist quite close to each other, and home-based work is prevalent in all of these categories of housing. So you will see over here the bindi making at the bottom, the bindi making, she's making a bindi. The work comes to her through contractors, those little figures on motorcycles depicting contractors. That's her home where the pointer is, that's where she lives. And the work comes from Sadar Bazaar, which is the wholesale market in Delhi. And then work goes back over there. Then in the JJ cluster, you see the home-based worker. Now here it is probably embroidery. It is embroidery. And these are real case studies that we've picked up, embroidery and embellishment. And here again, the work comes through contractor, but it is part of a chain of work, of supply chain, which goes beyond Delhi, even beyond India, perhaps at a global level. Then the third that you come to is a home-based worker who is cutting threads in jeans. So now this kind of work, she probably goes to the neighborhood warehouse, she walks or maybe takes a public transport, goes there, usually walks, and then picks up the work, gets it home, or does it and gives it back. It may be that, you know, the warehouse may have suppliers, may have people who deliver or and collect work, but what I'm trying to show to you is the how the work is traveling in these settlements. On the left-hand side, you will see home as a place of work, story of a neighborhood. And this is the a small house of a home-based workers, and the quality of house, the size of the house, all have an impact on her productivity. First of all, the space itself, the space for doing that work is provided by the worker. So the cost of space is borne by the worker. The fact that she has to translate her place of work to a place of living many times has cost implications, both in terms of her time and also in terms of her productivity. Same place, her family might eat breakfast, then she will clean up and start doing her work, and then when the children come in the afternoon, she does a little bit of snack making, etc., and then works. So that kind of transition is a burden that is carried by that woman worker who's working from home. But also the cost of working from a home where the quality may be poor is also borne by the woman worker, which means that she may not, there might be humidity in this weather, like the rainy weather just now. She may not be, there may not be enough, so she will not take a lot of work because she's scared that it will get spoiled. She might not take a particular kind of work. I remember once I was talking to a home-based worker and she told me that she did not take any embroidery on georgette and chiffon in the monsoon season because she said there were these small insects which eat into the fabric of georgette very quickly. She said overnight they will eat into that fabric. So I don't take, although it is very well paying. So she takes these decisions which are economically not the most the best decisions for her, but because of the kind of housing she has no storage, she can't buy raw material in bulk, she cannot put spaces. Work often spills out in the open area, adjoining areas, etc. As you can see in the picture below of these two young women working in a veranda outside their home. And the third one is also to show the kind of infrastructure, the kind of housing, you know, dense communities, water probably during rains comes in, water leaks, sewage overflows, somewhere else they have to get water, do a lot of cleaning. All of these have an impact on the productivity of the home-based workers. So when home is a place of work, there are many other issues about the home which have an impact on both the time, productivity, and income of the home-based workers. Similarly, the two photographs on the right show you the, you know, the time the woman might be spending on collecting water and the kind of dense buildings and communities that we are talking about. So to close, I'm just going to read the final message that we want to give, that because home is their workplace and workers are more affected than home-based workers are more affected than other workers by government housing policies and practices to do with slum eviction, upgradation, relocation, and tenure security, zoning regulations, etc., as well as the provision of basic infrastructure services, the water, sanitation, electricity, and transport. So here we see the connect between the urban issues, employment, informal employment, and informal habitat. Yes, can we go to the next one? So the next one is on waste. Waste pickers, we've called them waste warriors of Delhi, because we really feel it, COVID times have really shown us that they are waste warriors of Delhi. Also because Delhi is struggling to conquer this monster of solid waste management at the city level. At the bottom, you will see these pictures of our landfills, and you will see that our landfills are competing with the tallest monuments that we have in the city. And but just quickly to tell you where this data, first to take you through the keys, that they are the little red things that you see, the kind of key kind of things. Those are the location where waste picker community is. The source of this data is the Delhi Roundtable. Focal City Delhi promotes a roundtable of waste pickers. And the waste, here we have membership of several waste pickers organizations representing about 30 to 40,000 waste pickers in Delhi. And these are the locations of the communities of waste pickers. They also shows operational landfills, closed landfills, and waste to energy plants. You will see it on this map of Delhi. This is not to say that there are no communities in the western or the southernmost sites in the city, but we have information. This is hopefully a growing information. Currently, we have information about waste pickers community over in these areas. And I just want to say that the contribution of the waste pickers is also written on this map. One is the recycle, and in terms of recycling the waste and reducing the waste that goes into landfills. Delhi is really struggling with the size of the landfills, and then reduce emission and our collective environment burden. So they are making environmental contribution also. They are also sources of income. Often waste pickers are from marginalized migrant groups, so very important livelihood generation for these groups. And they, of course, make our cities healthier and cleaner and save resources and energy for the municipality. I also want to say one thing that, which I alluded to earlier, is that the location of where waste pickers live is also, they may be within a slum, but in terms of services, they have very, very poor services in terms of running water or toilets, and often they live in conditions which makes us say that it's like a slum within a slum. And access to some of the social services like childcare and health posts is also sort of a challenge because of the kind of the ostracization that they face. On the opposite side of this, and in the interest of time, I'm not going to go into it, but on the opposite side of this is, on the opposite side, so this like this, is a journey of waste picker in the waste chain system, and we have tried to recreate it. And now, These are available. We will be, I think in the chat, they are posting links. So I'm not going to go. And then finally, I want to show to you the third product, which is called Building Savda Ghevra, Life at Margins. And in this, what we have tried to do is on this side of the page, we've tried to show how when people from places like Paharganj were relocated 25 kilometers away in Savda Ghevra, and this whole process started around 2005, 2006, as we decided for Commonwealth Games, as Delhi prepared itself for Commonwealth Games. Here, what we have done is a timeline of actually infrastructure, housing, social, civil society, and we have shown from 2005 to 2021. If you could go right at the top, 2005 to 2021, we have shown how things have developed. We've divided it into three phases: plot allocation, basic services and connectivity, and improved connectivity and amenities. And it is in this context that you will hear Savita Ben's story, which is on the other side of this. Can you show the other side, please? Yes, this is the other side of this product. And Savita Ben, we are very, very happy to have her herself here to tell her this story. तो अब मैं सविता बहन से रिक्वेस्ट करूंगी कि सविता बहन, आप ये जो हमने एक चित्र में आपकी कहानी जो निकाली है उसको आप खुद ही बताएं.
आई थिंक सविता बहन आप म्यूट पर हैं. दिनेश भाई आप जरा चेक कर सकते हैं.
सविता बहन, अभी बहन मैं एक बार चेक करके आपको बताती हूँ.
थैंक यू बीना बहन. सविता बहन, हाँ सविता बहन, अब हम आपको सुन सकते हैं, प्लीज.
हेलो.
पर है म्यूट पर.
हेलो.
हाँ सविता बहन, आगे बोले.
हाँ बोलिए, बताइए सविता बहन. हाँ
नमस्कार, मेरा नाम सविता है, मैं सावदा घेवरा में रहती हूँ.
गुड इवनिंग, माय नेम इज सविता, आई लिव इन सावदा घेवरा. Earlier, I used to live in an area of Delhi called Paharganj, which is in central Delhi. I had my own home and I used to live very comfortably. We were told in 2006 that we would be evicted from there and we would be relocated to a place called Savda. We had to purchase a plot in Savda for 7,000 Indian rupees. When we first got here, there was nothing here. It was a forest. They had just demarcated the plots and we didn't know which plot was ours. The Delhi Urban Shelter Improvement Board then pointed out which is our plot. And so we used bamboo and rope to create a temporary shelter for ourselves. If it would rain or if there would be winds, our house would flood, the tarpaulin would go away with the wind. I had small children then and I used to be very scared that animals would attack them. For the first couple of years, we lived there with a lot of fear. A little further away, there is the Ghevra village where there were fields where I first started working. If we had to go to the nearby village, which was 3 kilometers away, to even get drinking water for ourselves.
और हम यहाँ रहते हैं बांस की चटाई की झुग्गियां बना करके। तो फिर वहाँ पर फिर पानी वगैरह वो देने लगे। उसके बाद फिर वहाँ से पानी वगैरह लाके राशन पानी लाके अपना वहाँ से 3 किलोमीटर है
We
वो।
used to get any food, water from this village, which was 3 kilometers away, because there was nothing where we lived.
कि हमारे यहाँ पर खेतों में काम होता है, आप खेतों में काम करोगे? तो हमने कहा हाँ, हम खेतों में काम कर लेंगे।
There were fields near this village where we first found work because there was no work available there when we first moved.
तो फिर हमने वहाँ पर खेतों में जाके काम किया, मैंने और मेरे हस्बैंड ने, दोनों ने।
Both my husband and I used to work in these fields as laborers.
फिर हमने वो बांस की झुग्गी एल्वेस्टर डाल के छोटा सा एक घर बना लिया, कच्चा घर।
Slowly,
एल्वेस्टर डाल
we
के बनाया हमने। उसके बाद
used alabaster to
वो काम खत्म
make
हो गया,
our
सीजन में
house a little
काम
more
खत्म हुआ तो फिर मैंने यहाँ हमारे पास
structurally
थोड़ा
stable.
2 किलोमीटर दूर है गंगा इंटरनेशनल स्कूल है। फिर मैंने वहाँ पर स्टोरी का काम किया।
After a little while, I was able to get a job as a security guard at a nearby school for about a year and a half.
मुझे छोड़ना पड़ा क्योंकि वहाँ पे 7 बजे अंदर एंट्री करना होता था स्कूल के अंदर।
And I had to leave it because the timings were not,
तो वो भी मैंने छोड़ा वहाँ से। फिर ठीक हुई तो फिर मैंने हॉस्पिटल में काम किया। हॉस्पिटल में काम कर
the timings were not okay for me to work at that school. So then I used to work as a cleaner in a nearby hospital. And at the same time, I used to also do a little bit of tailoring work from home. Both my husband and I used to work and try and earn whatever little money we could. Slowly, we sort of made our house more permanent and built a pakka house.
काम पर भी जाते थे, 2 छोटे बच्चे थे, मैं अपनी बच्ची को लेकर काम पे जाती थी, 8 महीने की बच्ची थी मेरी।
When I had first moved there, my daughter was 8 months old and I had to take her with me to work because there were so many animals. I was scared of leaving her home alone.
टैंकर आना शुरू हो गए साबदा में। फिर पानी भरने में बहुत दिक्कत होती थी।
Slowly, we had the water tankers come to our colony, but there used to be a lot of fighting to get water. There used to be a long line to get water. There were no individual toilets in our houses, and we had to stand in a line for the community toilets for very long. We still had to go to the city for work, but there were no bus nearby. It used to be very difficult to go to our place of work. In about 2008, MHT as an organization came and started working with us. They would give us training and raise awareness about if we wanted water, which government authority we had to go speak to get more water tankers. In the community, we became more aware of what is there. And now today, I have my own shop. I have worked and also made a 2-story house for myself. My husband and I have worked, and I also have my own boutique where I sell materials for stitching and tailoring. When we had first come here in 2006, there was nothing here. There was nothing to sustain human life here, nothing to feed our own children, no utilities at all. We had to struggle a lot. We faced a lot of challenges regarding water, work, employment. Both my husband and I worked as laborers. And now today I have my own shop, my own boutique, where I sell materials and other things for tailoring. Thank you, Savita Ben.
आपने अपना स्टोरी शेयर करा हमारे साथ और बहुत ही पावरफुल स्टोरी है लाइवलीहुड और अपनी जिंदगी और लाइवलीहुड का काम को बनाने की यहाँ पे, और आपको अपनी नई दुकान और बुटीक के लिए बहुत मुबारक।
Thank you for sharing your story and congratulations on your new boutique.
Swati Janu from Social Design Collaboration to present here. She will be talking about this whole process of building these visual documents. And I just want to say that, you know, we would not have, Focal City Delhi would not have been able to do it if it was not with the support of this team who not just pushed us in articulating things in a different way, in an interdisciplinary kind of way, but also took each of our concepts to the field, tested it there, and took it a step forward before they put it down into these beautiful visuals. So a special thank you to Swati, you and your team.
Thank you, Shalini. And Savita Ben, thank you. Savita Ben ki tabiyat bhi theek nahi hai. She's not feeling very well, but she has made it here for this presentation. And thank you everyone else who's still here with us, even though we have overshot the time a bit. So I'll make it quick. As designers, we try to use the medium of design to translate complex planning and policy constructs into simple, easy to understand concepts for people who these policies and plans affect directly. And for this, we use the medium of mapping often, because typically mapping is a top-down process, just like planning. And to be able to question it, to be able to challenge it, it's also important that we understand it and we speak the language ourselves. So very quickly, I wanted to share 3 quick examples of where we have used mapping as a tool in collective efforts. I'm going to share my screen. Sorry, 1 second. Okay, got it. So the first example is from a campaign called Main Bhi Delhi, of which WeGo and IIHS are also a part. The campaign stands for, Main Bhi Delhi stands for I Am Delhi Too. And Gautam, Shalini, Avi, Malvika, everyone here is a part of this campaign. It has over 40 civil society organizations who have been working for the last 3 years to make sure that Delhi's latest plan for 2041 is inclusive. And here's the concerns of the communities who have been left out of the previous 3 plans. The plan, which was recently launched in June 2021, is open for feedback till the end of this month. And the campaign has been busy organizing workshops, community engagement, community meetings across Delhi, for which the team had designed a toolkit called Kaun Hai Master, Kya Hai Plan, which translates to who's the master, what's the plan, and a playful take on not just how top-down the planning processes are, but also the name master plan, which is, as the name suggests, it's a classist colonial word, also sexist, because who's the master, who's above us all. The activity needed to be map-based so that we could then speak the language of the master plan, which is map-based. But maps are not something that most people use on a daily basis. They can also be very intimidating. So it was important to make it accessible by making it like a bed sheet, something you can surround around, you can sort of huddle over and then interact with it. And of course, things like popular landmarks, metro lines, which are color-coded in Delhi, just like any other city, these became really useful ways for people to orient themselves and then start understanding the plan. And I won't go into further detail, but the toolkit basically deconstructs the chapters of the master plan into simple activities. The second example is also from the campaign again. And this was from July and August last year, after the first wave of COVID had hit India and the cities were going through an unlockdown process. But the weekly markets in Delhi were still shut, affecting livelihoods of thousands of informal workers. And so at that time, the organizations in the campaign who work with street vendors, such as WeGo, Seva, Jan Pehal, as well as organizations like ours and City Sabha, they got together to support the street vendors and the market associations in self-organizing their markets, following social distancing norms. In turn, to be able to convince the authorities to reopen the weekly markets. So there was a piloting process where we could test these strategies, such as spray painting signage, using very low-cost materials for these social distancing strategies. And one of the other sort of outputs from this process was a manual on street vending. This was a collaboration between Vigo and our team. And this captured these strategies as well as the rights, street vendor rights, as encapsulated in the Street Vendors Act 2014. And another sort of output which came out of this process was this map. So this is a map of the weekly markets in Delhi. So there are 272 officially recognized weekly markets in the city. And this came from the data which was shared by Jan Pahel. And immediately you can see the extent of the markets and also the associated livelihoods to these markets. And this sort of making visible is so important to then be able to take this to the policymakers, to then be able to advocate for the rights of the street vendors, to be able to talk about things like representation and recognition. And also it became really important to understand the rich heritage, the cultural heritage of the city, and also its rural legacy, because so many of these markets continue from what were erstwhile villages, and they continue into the modern city as we know it today. And this is really just half the picture, because there are some other 200, 250 markets, and Shalini will know better about this. We still need to map them, and that's what the collective is working on. And finally, a third example. This is called the Missing Basti, which is an online archive. Basti stands for a self-built neighborhood. And this is a collective of which Gautam is a very integral part. And this actually archives all the forced evictions in Delhi over the last 30 years, from 1990 till today. And the archive, unfortunately, grows as the evictions take place. And the data comes from Gautam's own research, other researchers like Veronique Dupont, organizations like Housing and Land Rights Network. And it was very important for us to create this negative print of a city, this presence of an absence of what has been lost, to be able to mobilize action for policy advocacy, to help stop these forced evictions, and also perhaps begin the erasure of the loss that the city has experienced. So coming back to the visualizations which have been launched today, I'll quickly take you through the process, the behind the scenes. This is a team, and we were trying to understand the nature of the informal livelihoods which have been mapped. So it was important for us to visit the neighborhoods where home-based work takes place, where waste picking takes place, and of course, Safda Khebra, which is on the western border of the city. It was important for us to understand the quality of life, the quality of space in these neighborhoods. It was important to understand where work takes place in public spaces, on streets, when it comes to waste picking, segregation of waste. When it comes to home-based work, it's important to understand how it takes place within the home, which is a very multi-layered, multifunctional space which changes through the day. So you can see how the tailoring machine is right next to this super efficient kitchen, which is right next to the bathing space, and how the space also changes through the day. She is sticking bindis on the bindi cards, and this is actually a bedroom where her sons are sleeping right next to her. This is Anshul from her team, and also work spills over, sometimes occupies the thresholds between the inside and the outside, spills over to the platforms outside our homes. And these were the kind of things which were important for us to understand, to learn from the nature of the different home-based work and what goes into it on a daily basis. And also the stories that emerged from it, such as Savita's story today. And my team is also here. So if you have any questions on the process, please feel free. And thank you for being with us till now. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Swati. Thank you so much. We've overshot, but we'll take a couple of questions. So if there's anybody who wants to ask a question, comment, suggestion, very welcome.
Just to say, you can raise your hand or unmute yourself to ask your question.
Marty Ben, yes, please, Marty Ben.
Well, just first and foremost, I'm just thrilled. As Shalini knows, we used to dream about mapping, and now it's more than a dream come true. So this is very exciting. And I just wanted a quick question from anyone in the campaign as to how the materials have worked at the community level, the tools that Swati talked about, but also how you've been able to use them, or whether yet you've been able to use them in negotiations at the city level.
Okay, so I'm going to go first very quickly, and then perhaps Malvika and Swati can join. I just wanted to say that, you know, the weekly markets are so integral to Delhi, and we opened our malls much before we opened the weekly markets. We had a lot of, so all this work that went into it, actually, I think 2 weeks back, was it, Swati, or 10 days back? Finally, the government, the Delhi government allowed all the weekly markets to open. So it has borne fruit, all the work that these people have been doing. And many of our partners like Jan Pahal have been taking these designs to the local commissioners, to saying that weekly markets can be opened with social distancing and COVID protection. So I'm going to just stop there. We have a success there with the weekly markets. And then maybe Swati and Malvika, if you could quickly comment on how you have used these material for the master plan training with the community.
The toolkits I can talk about, because the 3 visualization we've just launched today, we are yet to share them with the different communities we work with, and hopefully we can also translate them into different languages. The toolkits have really helped host, I don't know, around 100 workshops. At least we're getting there. And I think Malvika will be able to share this better, but there are some 10,000 objections which are coming from the campaign because of these workshops, which have been held across the city, you know, on street corners, on streets, in people's homes with courtyards and adequate ventilation, you know, in chalks within dense neighborhoods, and also in parks. Well, the Delhi Development Authority is saying that it's not really possible to do community engagement because of COVID, but we have been able to show that indeed it is possible. Hybrid models are possible where you can combine physical engagement following all COVID protocol with online, you know, sort of connection as well. So I think it's gone really well. And also thanks to DDA for the 1 month extension. So you've actually got time to be able to scale the initial sort of vision. Yeah, and for the weekly markets, they reopened after our efforts. I don't know how much of our efforts contributed. I'd like to think they had a role to play. And again, now the weekly market after the second wave have just started opening. So yeah, we keep trying, and sometimes it bears fruit. Malvika, please do add the latest status of the workshops.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to actually highlight another way in which these products have fed into the campaign, which is when we are kind of filing our formal objections and suggestions. It was really helpful to have this kind of a spatial picture in mind, that, you know, to identify, like Gautam had mentioned, that where is clustering happening, and then we were able to sort of identify that we also need to comment on the clause which talks about industrial areas being redeveloped or relocated. So having this kind of a mapping of home-based work immediately drew attention when we read that clause, that this is something that we need to comment on. And similarly, I think in terms of resettlement, in terms of services needing to reach before people are moved anywhere. So all of those demands are definitely getting strengthened and sort of reinforced by the insights we're getting from this ongoing mapping. It's definitely not exhaustive, but we're hoping to continue with this.
We can take one more question and then we'll have to close.
I think Sarah has a question.
Yes, Sarah has a question.
Hi, this is incredible work and really glad you're sharing it all. I actually wanted to ask, in terms of doing this work, when a lot of organizations are also building, funding becomes a really big issue. And in terms of, getting people who are interested in doing this work may not be able to actually financially support it. How have you guys managed doing that?
Swati, you want to take that?
We work with organizations like Vigo who are very, I think, generous in their support. No, but the serious answer is I think everyone pulls in what they can in terms of time and resources. And I mean, because it's a collective effort and somehow it's been going on for 3 years, the campaign, and even the Missing Basti Collective is another collective effort which has been going on for over 3 years. So there is something that keeps it rolling. I think what we perhaps lose out on because of lack of resources often is time and speed. So these things maybe take much longer than they would have otherwise. But yeah, I think people pull in whatever they can, and it definitely helps to have bigger organizations supporting perhaps smaller organizations who might not be able to do this on their own.
But
so, Shalini, can I come in for 1 second on that?
Yes,
Sorry.
yes. Yes.
I just want to underscore that work, right? I mean, I think if you look at the Missing Basti project, it is entirely a voluntary non-funded collective. And Swati is right, it takes us twice the time, but we get there. And I think there is a deep value in getting there in this way. And I actually just want to use this moment to also urge that cycles of work and ideas that begin in those ways often then find opportunities to survive financially, because support comes in, partnerships come in, scale comes up. But very often it's also getting to that first piece of work doesn't have to come from a project. I think one of the things that has really kind of hit the politics of a lot of our cities and our organizing is the projectization of our work. And we wait for those projects, and we wait for those projects to come to us. And I think what's wonderful that everything Swati is telling you is not a project that came to them. It was ideas of things that had to be done. And so one did them. And then on the way, one found how to help out them. And I think the return to really, it's not to romanticize non-funded collectives, but it's also not to dismiss them as viable forms of getting work done that allows you to be strategic. And the more our partnerships come, maybe Delhi is like that. You have 40 plus organizations in, the resources come in when they need to come in. So I think the thing also is about to not make the resource also too much of a hindrance at the beginning. There are more opportunities. The wider the networks, the wider the collaboration, the wider that sharing can happen. But I think it's really important to have some spaces where really it is non-funded collective work. It's very powerful. It remains powerful. And I think there's something to that is also the story of what you're hearing today.
I think, like, in my experience has always been that issue of wanting to take ideas forward, but a lot of work can't be done on your own, as you have discussed and shown here, and much of it has to be collaborative. So I think it's the handicap that then you face when you feel like you're working on this alone and you don't have a network to tap into. Right. So I think those are also the resources that I'm trying to understand a little bit more as to when you're trying to create this, it's not about projectization, it's about working on the work, as you mentioned, that needs to be done. But sometimes there are certain very practical issues that you may not be able to figure out. Right? Like, for instance, in my experience, a lot of the work that I've tried to do has been on a voluntary engagement. But when I'm reaching out to people to say, hey, would this interest you? Can we collaborate on this together? Many people have been like, but what's the outcome of it? Where is it going to go? And then also losing, sight of it, or also just losing interest. So I think it's that bit that I'm also trying to understand a bit more.
Yeah, they're not easy. But I think if anything else today can show you that collectives exist and they are strong, and you find the right set of folks and you hang on for dear life, basically. The people are harder than the money.
Yeah, it's about finding your family, I guess, or non-biological family. So yeah.
Let's say friends. Friends are better metaphor than family.
So, thank you, everyone. But, on that note, I do want to thank organizations and individuals who have supported us in this work. SEWA, ISST, MHT, Delhi Roundtable for Waste Pickers, Jan Pahel, Maybe Delhi Campaign, City Sabha, and of course, some of the people who are present here. So thank you very much to all these people, and thank you to the panelists. Savita Ben, aapka khas dhanyavad. Thank you to all the panelists. and Swati and her team, also a special thanks for all the good work. Thank you. So we'll close here. If these products are available with us, they are available online also. I think links have been shared. We can share them also with anybody who wants to use them. Very happy. I mean, these are we have produced them to be shared with and used on the ground. Thank you.
Good evening, ma'am.
Yes.
Hello. Good evening, ma'am.
Haji.
My name is Sarvind, madam, from Andhra Pradesh, madam. State coordinator, madam.
और आप इसके बाद बात कर लें क्योंकि अभी तो हमने ये इवेंट को अब क्लोज कर दिया है, तो हाँ, तो अगर हम इसके बाद ये कॉन्वर्सेशन को ले जाएं तो वेरी वेलकम। मैं जरूर हमारी टीम आपसे बात करना चाहेगी। ठीक है?
ओके मैम, ठीक है मैम।
थैंक यू।
Thank you all.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.